Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley. Hello there and welcome to the WP Builds podcast once again. This is episode number 90, can you believe it, entitled Gutenberg, Let's Have a Block Party with Eric Debelak. It was published on Thursday, the 23rd of August, 2018. My name's Nathan Wrigley from pictureandword.co.uk, a small web development agency based in the north of England, and I'll be joined a little bit later by David Wormsley from davidwormsley.com, so that we can have our top and tail discussion and ending fact. Before the interview with Eric Debelak, we're going to have a discussion which is rather lengthily titled, Do we need to project a personal image? Does my WordCamp T-shirt say it all? And right at the very end, just for a couple of moments, we've got an ending fact which is not a fact at all, and it's called Stop Eating My Brains. You can find out about that before the cheesy music rolls on at the very, very end. Just a couple of things to mention. If you go over to wpbuilds.com/deals, you can avail yourself of some plugin discounts. So, for example, 20% off Toolset, 25% off main WP, you've got 20% off Blog Vault and Malcare, and so on and so forth. And also, if you go to wpbuilds.com/subscribe, you can subscribe to us wherever we are. Most notably, I think the best place really is subscribing or joining the Facebook group. We've got over 1,306 members or something as of right now. And it's a really thriving community. And if you go to wpbuilds.com/subscribe, you can get into that group by clicking the link. On the other hand, you could subscribe to the newsletter or the messenger thing where we just simply update you and so on and so forth. We're not into spam. We just don't do that. So there you go. If you are listening to this on the day that it was released, the 23rd, you might be just in time to get on a webinar with Andre Gagnon from Project Huddle. It's going on an hour after this podcast is released. You might have to be quick off the mark, but there you go. Pause this, go and subscribe to that webinar and then come back. You'll find out about Project Huddle. Okie dokie. And yes, if you can leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, that would be most welcome. All right. Okay. So just to tell you about Eric Debelak, he's got a project called WPBlocks.Party. I don't know if it's WPBlock or WPBlocks.Party or WPBlock.Party. Anyway, that's what it is. And it's a set of blocks for Gutenberg. Loads and loads of blocks, data visualization, accordion, statistics, all of this kind of stuff. You can find out about all of those. I would, however, point out that since we recorded the podcast a month or so ago, they've had a bit of a change of heart. You'll hear in the podcast that he mentions the 12 blocks being all premium. In other words, you had to pay for them all. Well, they've decided only to keep the data visualization ones in the premium offering, and they've decided to put everything else in the WP repo for free. So that's really good. But I don't think the repo version is available yet. Depending on when you listen to this, it might be or it might not. I would, however, also draw your attention to the fact that if you go to wpbuilds.com/win, you've got a chance of winning one of 3 of the agency licenses for his product. So wpbuilds.com/win. Go check it out. You might get a chance to win it, which would be great. Share it with your friends and they might win as well. Okay, let's get on with it. Let's go over to the discussion now with David and I would just like to say thank you so much for listening to the podcast once more.
And today's discussion, we're calling, do we need to project a personal image? And we've got a subtitle, or does my WordCamp T-shirt say it all? So Nathan and I were discussing this a little bit before, and we went off into all sorts of areas of marketing. So I think we'll probably end up doing a bit of a series. But for this one, we're going to concentrate as best as we can on the way that we look and present ourselves to other people. So a little bit about clothing and maybe attitude.
Can I just qualify this before we begin by saying I am probably right at the end of a spectrum on this topic because I have so little regard for the way I look. Actually, that's not entirely, I don't walk around with nothing on or holes in every part of my clothing. But I just don't really think about this too much. So with that caveat, go for it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I got prompted on this one for two reasons. One is that I think I need to do some videos for my own website, which I'm kind of launching. So I want to introduce each product. And I'm thinking, well, what should I wear with this? And actually, you probably said something which I thought was sensible and exactly what I was thinking. Maybe that's why it seemed sensible. But to wear something like a simple polo T-shirt, which is what I used to wear, which kind of is a bit smart casual, which kind of probably fits me.
Yeah, I think if you're going to be putting yourself out there and you want to present an image of kind of quiet confidence but not arrogance, I don't really know what that means. But yeah, I think the idea of something which is, it's not a T-shirt or a Hawaiian shirt or a T-shirt with like a Minecraft logo on it or something more offensive.
Yeah.
But then nor is it a shirt and a tie, which kind of feels like it's drifting towards white collar businessman or something like that. It's smart-ish, but it's not too over the top. That is, of course, depending on the colour of the shirt that you choose. Something a bit bland. Whenever I go to client meetings, I kind of made the decision a long time ago, somewhat arrogantly and presumptuously, I think, that I was going to go dressed kind of how I am. I don't possess a suit. I've never worn a suit, except for one rare occasion, which I told you about earlier, when I wore it for about half an hour. And so I wear a plain T-shirt, and by that I mean literally it's monocolour. It's in it's in good condition, but it's one simple colour. I wear a pair of newish jeans, so the knees haven't gone through or anything, and I wear a pair of shoes. And I think that represents what I am and who I am, and I feel quite comfortable turning up like that. If I was to wear a shirt and a tie, I genuinely hate it. I feel uncomfortable. I'm going to be fiddling with my neck. I dislike it. I can't see the point personally of wearing this flap of material which just dangle. I don't even know why people wear them. I mean, what is the purpose of a tie? Is it just to disguise the buttons? Is that where it came from? So that's what I do, and I figure, all right, it's not the best image in the world, and probably some people will take a little bit of umbrage to that. But I have to say, nobody has ever kicked me out or looked me up and down at the door and kind of given me a roll of the eye. So I feel okay with that.
Have you ever felt out of place at a meeting?
Possibly, but nothing to do with the way I look, more to do with the content of what they were talking about, where I felt like, oh, actually, this is nothing that I understand sometimes. But I think the web developer freelancer community does have this sort of feel about it. I think they expect a certain degree of autonomy and free thought, and I think it's quite normal to wear jeans and T-shirts in our industry. If you look at like a Google I/O presentation where the senior staff from Google come out, or if you look at an Apple presentation, Steve Jobs in particular, it just jeans and T-shirt. That's the mantra. That's the way it is, and I think people understand that. This is what we do. We're not stuck in an office. We're not obeying the man, and that's fine.
Yeah, what I saw? I mean, the other thing that prompted me to think about this was somebody, it was in another Facebook group, and it was talking about pricing of projects, and somebody said that they were able to boost up, or rather win the bid with the highest bid. And it was a passing comment really, is that they look the part. They said, they dressed up well, they use good paper as well, like they use when they're doing their presentation. But, I got the impression that they were kind of suited, or at least wearing expensive looking clothes. I could have been wrong, but it did make me think about this. And I thought, well, maybe we're not all Steve Jobs, and
no, we're not.
And he can kind of get away. So it did make me think a little bit whether we need to, depending on who we're dealing with, whether we need to present something that's different to what we usually do. We think we can wear T-shirts. We think our WordCamp T-shirts are pretty cool amongst our group, but perhaps we need to throw something else in.
Yeah, I would say that they're not my client, and I don't mean that from the point of view of me. Oh no, I'm never going to work for them. I just mean they're not dialing my telephone number.
Yeah.
This is people usually who live in my community or live within a short distance, and it's not a corporate thing. It's not an entity. Usually I'm dealing with the person who is directly responsible for the website, and they're probably one person removed from the top of the company, possibly two.
Yeah.
So it's not such a big deal. But yeah, I'm sure that comment is absolutely true. If you were going for corporate look, which I've never, ever done, I don't think I'd be successful at all, because I think if I walked through the door, I would present entirely the wrong image. And, I'd be the only person probably in the entire building who looked like that. But then I guess, some people are charismatic and they have that certain thing about them. They are raconteurs and they can talk and talk the talk, and they can probably overcome these obstacles. But if it's a 50-50 toss-up between you and the guy with the greasy hair who looks like he was dragged out of bed, maybe the way you dress, the fact that you bothered with the suit and the tie and combed your hair and all of that, maybe that would make the difference. It's just the world I live in that makes me say this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're not a suit wearer. I mean, I had a moment in my time, and I think it was when I was feeling very fit and slim, where I liked wearing a suit, and I really got into it, But my job before was really about this all the time. I mean, I managed a group of people who, for the government, knocked on selected doors and effectively cold called and got people to spend an hour with them. And we had two sections. One, for some reason, some people did a particular survey, and they all wore suits because managers there believed that was the thing to do when you knocked on people's doors in a professional capacity. And then they had the side that I was on, which did other kind of more generic surveys. And we all, to them, seemed like hippies because we wore whatever we wanted.
Right.
We believed that was the way to get on with people. And it was really fascinating, particularly when these two groups of people came together, because some people just lost their suits from leaving leaving the department, if you like, who said you had to wear a suit. Some of them lost them, and some of the people who in the more sort of slack do what you like things adopted the suit. And it was interesting. I think it just came down to people asking themselves again the question, what do they look like? What do they feel comfortable in? What image are they projecting? And I think it made people reassess what they were doing. So I saw some change.
I think it's really interesting. I think the industry that you're in, so in our case, web developers, and in your case, whatever it was you were doing at that moment. But also, let's say, for example, you're an estate agent. I would fully expect a bank clerk or an estate agent to have a suit. And I'd find that really weird if they didn't. I mean, to be honest with you, it wouldn't put me off. I'd just think, oh, that's interesting. There's obviously some sort of policy change there, and they're allowed to do this now. Whereas I really, really do think that it's fine. I wonder if anybody has literally lost a job because of the way they got dressed. It'd be interesting if you could put some comments in the feedback. Or the other way, if you actually believe that the way you dress got you the job. Or perhaps is it something you would like to address when you enter the building? I hope you don't mind. I've come dressed in my sort of casual clothes today because this is what I'm comfortable in. I hope that's all right. I say nothing and hope for the best, but maybe just tackling it head on, if you get that sideways glance, would delay those fears.
Yeah, we were talking about Lee Jackson. From the agency Trailblazer podcast.
Yes.
He was laughing at himself on one of his earlier video promos for what was then Lee Jackson Dev. And he was all clean shaven. He was wearing this grey suit. He had this air of a kind of junior conservative politician from somewhere like Slough, an industrial town or something. And he was really taking a mickey out of himself. And he's completely different now with his look. And it's much cooler. He's got the beard, the baseball cap. He's got this somewhat alarming, flowery shirt that he keeps wearing. But, he does look cooler. But I would love to know, I doubt he will listen to this, but what he thinks, because he has definitely changed his image, and whether that's had an impact on the kind of work he does.
I wonder if it was an effort to put the suit on for that video in the first place, if you know what I mean. And so he was reverting to his type, and he felt I stepped out of what I truly am in order to, make these videos. I guess most people who turn up for a 9 to 5, though, have just got to bite the bullet and get on with it. We're in a very lucky position in that 90% of 95% of the stuff I do doesn't require me to wear any clothes whatsoever. I could quite happily sit here. I might be naked now, for all you know. That's quite a nice. Yeah, you do. You saw me just a moment ago, and I can guarantee listeners that I am not naked. The fact is, you can get away with it, and it's quite nice. And some people, I believe, go into this job because of those kind of things. The fact that you can work inconvenient hours, you can put in the work when you like, and you can dress how you like. And I suppose agencies might well take a different approach to the clothes that are worn by some people in the company. Those people who are public facing might be required on trips out to dress up, whereas the people in the dark dungeon coding area of the building might be allowed to get away with anything. Grow the hair long and don't shave and all of that. He said, getting quite long hair now and a bit of a shaving problem. Are you go on, you carry on.
No, I was just going to say, I never really thought about this. I've had to think about it in the past, excuse me, quite a lot. But, I'm reminded now of a salesman that I knew who used to wear this fake tan, particularly on his arms, because he was selling, I believe, some kind of investment. And I guess what he wanted to do was to impart this dream that these people who invest through his company will be, spending their time relaxing on the beach in some exotic location. So he always wanted to look like he'd always just been on a holiday, kind of fitted the dream that he was selling, I guess.
You know what? That might work, but it would never work on me. I just think that's so weird. Clearly, look, just below the neckline, you're a bit whiter, aren't you, sunshine? There's something a bit strange going on here. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's taking it to extremes. I am, as I said, on the end of this spectrum. Yes. I'm very, very wedded to the fact that I don't have to answer to the man. I don't have to wear this, that, and the other thing, and it makes me happy. Do you with your videos, do you think you would ever sort of brand any of the clothes that you wear? For example, would you have a polo T-shirt with your custom logo on it or anything like that? Or you don't want or would you ever want your body to become part of the branding?
Yeah, I think I probably wouldn't. I think a lot of people say it's a good idea, isn't it? Just put your branding wherever you can. But I don't know. It never feels quite right, because I always feel when I see any kind of slapped on branding on videos or something, I think they've made that thing to brand to me. And it kind I don't know, it kind of seems a little bit artificial. Maybe I'm oversensitive to it, but
yeah. I think that also represents kind of one end of a spectrum. Certainly when I watch videos, I can kind of put that out of my mind. I don't do it myself. Maybe I do. Do I? I'm just trying to think. Certainly on the WP Build stuff, there's our logo and sometimes our faces as well. So that's definitely out there. But it's always on the stuff. It's never me, if you know what I mean. It's not me meeting people in the real world. And on the internet, maybe on the wider internet, that's a little bit more interesting. I have a friend who has a car on which they've put their all of their logos and what have you. They own a business in my town. I won't go into it, but all of their logos are surrounding their car, and so their trips to school and their trips into town is sitting in an advert basically. And I often thought, actually, that's very cost effective, because it costs a few £100. And then that's it, assuming you keep your car in a good condition and you clean it. That's probably the reason I don't do it on my car. But then also that weird thing about driving around in an advert. Would you ever do that?
I can't imagine me doing it for this, but my brothers both have businesses and they both drive around in their vans and cars that have the branding on it. So
is there a car that they drive around, on family trips and outings at the weekend? That's branded as well, is it?
Yeah, I think so. I think, okay. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about, you nip off, you go on holiday or something to France. It's just weird driving around in an advert. But I'll tell you what, you can't get much better value for money if it keeps paying back. If somebody says, "Oh, I saw your car," and I've phoned you up. Well, man alive, it's. But I need to clean my car far more frequently if I were ever to think about anything like that.
I've been in your car, Nathan, so I would agree.
Yes, Mike. Yeah, exactly. And that's the cleaner of the two. What about other little things like wearing badges that you could take off, or handing out business cards and all of that kind of stuff? Do you do any of that?
No, but do you know what? We should move this one into because I think this is a topic of its own, because unless we're sticking our faces on it, we probably moved off our personal image stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so we may be, because I think there's a lot in this topic, actually, because I'm thinking of some ideas.
Branding. Okay, in that case, we've done quite a nice lengthy talk on that, to be honest, David. So if it's all right with you, we'll probably knock it on the head. I had a Facebook message the other week saying somebody had learnt what knock it on the head meant, and it hadn't occurred to me that was a bit of English, British English, if you like, dialect. But knock it on the head, for those that don't know, means we're going to stop now. So, yeah, thanks, David. That was a good one. We'll carry it on in a more specific way another time. But for now, should we go over to the interview?
Yeah.
Hi there. Thanks for getting to this part of the podcast. We're on the interview part. And today we have Eric Debelak, all the way from New Mexico. Hi, Eric.
Hello.
Eric is joining us today. I think Eric reached out to me. I can't remember how we got hooked up, Eric, but a few weeks ago I got starting chatting with Eric, and he was telling me about an exciting new product. We seem to be going on more and more recently about Gutenberg, so much so that it's kind of become a staple of the podcast, and here we are again. But it's always exciting to talk about Gutenberg because it's the way things are going to be. So Eric brings something quite interesting and new that I've not yet really had a great deal of experience with, and that is something called WPBlocks.Party, which I have to say is a very, very cool domain.
Thank you.
So you can go to https / all of that, WPBlocks.Party. I didn't even know that .party was a domain, but there you go. And what you'll find there is a range of blocks which you can add into Gutenberg. So my first question for you, Eric, if that's all right, why do we need extra blocks in Gutenberg, this brand spanking new, well thought out text editor, let's call it? Why do we need more stuff?
Well, it's just like, why do we use plugins for WordPress? There are people where the core of Gutenberg or the core of WordPress, that will be enough for them. But I think most people are going to want something more. So the default blocks are around putting in images, text, different types of text styling. But what if you want something more interactive, something more interesting? And So I first started thinking about building more blocks when we had WordCamp Albuquerque in January. Mm-hmm. And one of my friends said, wouldn't it be cool if somebody could build data visualization tools for Gutenberg? And I thought, well, let's give it a try. And so the first one I did was a pie chart. And that's really, it's one of the more advanced ones that we've done, but it really was very helpful for me for seeing the power of building custom blocks and why you'd want more. And the pie chart, for instance, you put in your data, and then you have little sliders or toggle buttons like, do I want a 3D pie chart? Do I want to spin it? What type of labels do I want on it? And as you're doing this, you actually see the pie chart being built in real time, and all the changes, all the little slider things that you do or toggle buttons that you hit. As soon as you make that change, you see a preview of what your site is going to look like. Mm. And so we have so much more. There's so many interesting things we can do with building custom blocks, not only in terms of, we need all these cool elements, but also we can build our pages and see what they're going to look like before we ever publish them, and not have to hit the preview button, but everything reacts in real time.
Just for people who are unfamiliar with Gutenberg, as of the middle of 2018, where we are at the moment, what does it come with, apart from, as you've just mentioned, like text and images? What else is there out of the box that you get with a vanilla install?
It's a lot of the stuff that comes with like what we think of with TinyMCE. So there's headings, text, images, quotes, like block quotes, pull quotes. They do have one more advanced image that allows you to put text over it. You can still do galleries. And then it has all the embeds, like YouTube or Vimeo, or all the same things that right now you can do in TinyMCE with a shortcode.
So I guess the big benefit from what we've got at the moment, TinyMCE, to where we're going with Gutenberg is, as you said, this sort of visual feedback. The idea that, well, in your case, taking the example of a pie chart, you put the pie chart in, interact with the pie chart until it's as you want it, but you see it at that point, as opposed to having to click save, click preview, go into a different tab, check it, then go back in and edit and do it all over again because it wasn't quite right.
Well, that's one of the advantages, but I do think there's another huge advantage for people who are used to using post meta. So if you build sites and you're putting in all these custom fields, how that it works, like it's a good experience, and people do it. We do it right now. We've done it for years for client sites, because TinyMCE doesn't allow you to put in these little options of saying, oh, I want a address field here. So that gets saved as post meta, which in terms of how the WordPress database is organized, it's not efficient. It wasn't made for that. It's just that's kind of the hacky way that we've all been doing it, because that's the way that's been available. And so you have performance issues with that. But now we can Gutenberg saves everything in the content. So instead of having all these custom fields that get saved to this other database table, we're able to just save everything in the content. And that's by default searchable by WordPress, which PostMeta is not. And it also allows us to do templating, Gutenberg does, which I think is also a really exciting thing, where, like before we might be using those custom fields to do templating, but now when you define a custom post type or something like that, you can define a template. And so imagine your clients going in and saying, oh, I want to add a new employee to my site. And they pull up the page and everything is there visually for them. They just have to click on it and change the text, change the image.
Yeah,
I think it's a very powerful.
Yeah, it really
change.
is. It's kind of something that, unless you've really sort of seen it and played with it, it's hard to describe, because although the current system of filling in like post meta fields, it works, and you've got a disconnect between the way it looks and the way it's presented, which in some ways can be quite nice. I agree with you. It's phenomenal, and actually seeing that employee data, if you like, getting updated right where it should be, is certainly for somebody who has not really got experience with a CMS, then that's just exactly probably what they're expecting to see. Perhaps they're familiar with operating with Microsoft Word or something, where the way it looks is the way it looks. That's the end of it. So I agree. And for clients, I think it's probably going to be something they're going to embrace immediately. So that the general population of WordPress users, which in the end of the day is the clients, are going to love it. So you've got these extra blocks which you can add into Gutenberg. Let's move over to that. So I'm looking at the moment at WPBlocks.Party /block. And at the moment, I'm presented with, what have we got for 12 different blocks. Do you want to just quickly tell us the names of some of your key blocks that you like the most, some of the more exciting ones, and tell us a little bit about what each of them does, because we might not be familiar with these.
Yeah. So I kind of already talked about the data visualization ones. We also have a line chart and a bar chart, and we're working right now to build an integration with Google Sheets for those.
Yeah, nice.
So that, because a lot of people have maybe online forms that get that update a Google Sheet, or they do different things then that can be the source that you update, and the block just pulls from that.
That's nice. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So it's not out yet, but we're working on it.
Yeah.
We have pricing table. We have a carousel that, or a slider. There's a lot of sliders out there, but it's nice to kind of be able to see what it's going to look like as you build it. An accordion, the pricing table and the statistics block work in a similar way, where you can just add as many items as you want, and it responds to how many items there are. And a lot of these, these are really built for people that want these elements on their page, and we try to build as much customization as possible. So you can change the colors, you can add a lot of extra text fields or not have them. And we just try to make it flexible. And the statistic block, for instance, you can change the color, you can flip the presentation of the statistics, you can have it count up or not. You can say, what kind of, I forget what the term, the separator is. Do you use a period for the thousands or a comma?
Yep.
And things like that.
So when you've settled on these 12, and as of now, if you were to buy WPBlocks.Party, would you receive all 12 of these, or are there more going to be coming down the road that are not yet described on the page?
Yeah, we're planning on selling these just as a bundle, so you'd always get all of them. So all the ones that we do in the future would also be just bundled with this. If you have updates, you would just get the new ones. And if you're worried about performance, one thing that we do is we allow you to turn them on and off. So if you have blocks you don't need, you can turn them off, which will then not use all those, won't enqueue those files for your WordPress site. So it'll be a little faster.
Oh, I see. So let's say, for example, you didn't want the accordion. You could turn that off in the settings for the plugin itself. And then globally, that just means it's unavailable.
Yes.
Is there a way to, I don't suppose there is, you can't make it that available on a page by page or post by post basis, just off it goes. No, I think that's fair, and I think that's probably the right approach, isn't it? Switch it off. If you're never going to use data visualization, which a lot of people won't, turn off the line chart and the pie chart and the bar chart and save yourself a tiny little bit of the payload that you're shuffling across the internet. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
What's on the roadmap for the future? What ones are you thinking of adding? So if somebody goes to the page at the minute, there's 12. What are we going to be adding as number 13 and 14 and so
on? Well, the next one that we are looking at adding is a timeline. And so I don't know if that might be hard to describe, but like a vertical line with dates.
Yep.
And then on either side, there's text. We want to add that one. There's some plans for a steps block when you have like a multi-step process that you can walk through.
Oh, yeah.
One thing that we're considering adding, and I don't know if this is a separate product or not, but adding AMP blocks, Accelerated Mobile Pages blocks.
All right.
So Accelerated Mobile Pages has come a long way, and there's a lot of SEO benefits and page speed benefits. And actually the AMP paradigm and Gutenberg can really work well together. So we're thinking about, is that something that we want to bundle with this, as well as having these native AMP elements?
Okay. So in the future, you're certainly planning on doing more than what we've got at the moment and developing it. In terms of customization, obviously at the moment, if you're somebody that builds websites, then you're very familiar with how this works. But if you're tuned into this podcast and you're a bit of a new person to WordPress and you've never used something like a page builder, it might be quite nice to pick one of these blocks that's got lots of customization options and describe exactly how that works. So I don't know, maybe the pie chart. How do you get the data in? How do you fiddle with the colors? How do you interact and make all that happen? Because you may be thinking, oh, it just sounds like more CSS and more styling and blah, blah, blah. And of course, it's not that at all, is it?
No. So what happens is Gutenberg has this concept of is a block selected? So you have many blocks on a page, but only one is selected at a time. And when you have that block that's selected, you can do things like show additional editing options. So what you'll get then is you'll see the preview of the pie chart when it's not selected, but when you select it, you get to see all the options for interacting with it. And some of these are off to the right-hand side where there's advanced settings for each block, and some are just above. And so right now, until we build the Google Sheets integration, and we'll probably still leave manual data entry in, but you can add slices to the pie chart that has a name and a value. And then each slice has some options. There's a color picker, so you can choose which color you want it to be. And the color picker is what Gutenberg has theme level. It's called the color palette. So what's really nice is when you build a theme or make a theme, you have a default set of colors, or you can make your own. And if you set your own, that makes it also really great for your clients to say, well, here are the 5 colors we use on your site. And if that was the case, then the pie chart would show those 5 colors.
Nice.
So it always will match branding. And then there's some additional options like the exploding offset of a pie chart that is per slice. And then on the right-hand side, you'd have a 3D toggle. We have the donut hole option, which makes it how big is the donut hole, a height, what style of labels are there? Is it a key? Is it labeled with lines? Pie chart rotation is another option, and then visibility threshold, which is if you have insignificant data, for instance, like you don't want to do a slice for anything that has less than 3%.
Yep.
You can that would turn into an other slice. And then also the ability, each Gutenberg block just by default always has the ability to add a class or a series of classes, CSS classes, if you want to further control the styling in your theme.
Does, because I'm not a Gutenberg developer, I should say Gutenberg, I can never decide which one to say. Anyway, there we go. Does Gutenberg come bundled for a developer such as yourself? So you drag the Gutenberg block into place, and then the menu on the right-hand side updates itself to say, hey, we're interacting with the pie chart now, or hey, we're interacting with the divider, or whatever. You mentioned the color palette, the color picker, and so on. Does Gutenberg supply a sort of suite of things that you can drop into your plugin? Is that handled by Gutenberg, or do you have to build that in? The reason I ask this question is because one of the things that kind of a bit of a pet hate, I suppose, is when the ecosystem gets fragmented and WordPress starts to look completely different over here with this plugin than it does over here with this plugin. And we've all seen that. You know, you go to a plugin settings and suddenly actually you're not really using WordPress anymore. The whole page has been taken over and it's something entirely different. And it feels to me, having played with Gutenberg, that everything is consistent. You know, the little icons for the colors are little tiny circles and they look very cute and neat. Is that stuff that you hook into, or do you have to write that yourself?
Yeah, so Gutenberg comes with a ton of stuff built in. And I've been speaking at WordCamps about Gutenberg development. And if you go to WordPress.tv and just search for Gutenberg, you'll find several of my talks. And I kind of go over those in more detail, but just briefly here, there's a ton of stuff that's built in that's reusable. And so there's a standard way of interacting with the blocks. It uses the concept of, they're called attributes. And if you're familiar with React development, it's very similar to React State. So you interact with these elements the attributes in a standardized way. All the settings, the advanced settings on the right-hand side, those are components that are made as a part of Gutenberg core that Gutenberg, if you've done some JavaScript with WordPress, you'll know that WordPress has a WP global, and especially some people who have done work with the API, or if you just pull up a WordPress site, especially on the admin side, and you in your JavaScript console type in WP, you'll see all that's available there. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of API helpers and other things. So when you install Gutenberg, all the blocks, all the default blocks, all their like building blocks of blocks, like they have rich text elements, plain text elements, media uploads, and then all the settings on the right-hand side. Those are all available through that global, that JavaScript global. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So when you build your own blocks, all you do is you just import those and you use the ones that you won't need to use. And it is very standardized. And if people stick to that convention, you're exactly right. People are it doesn't matter which plugins they install. It doesn't, if they move from one WordPress site to another, as long as they're using Gutenberg, everything's going to feel really familiar because it is. It's the same pieces.
Yep. I'm really hopeful on that side of things. One of the things that drives me a little bit bonkers is my clients' inability, I suppose, because of they're not into building a WordPress website. They're not in any way technical or have an understanding of WordPress. But that's one of the things I get all the time is, well, why doesn't it look the same? Why is this different? Why is this moved over here? And I hope that people like you will use all of these components. Everybody will use them so that everything does look standardized, because if they're there, why not make use of them? There's always going to be somebody though, isn't there, just because I want it different. They're going to do it just to stand out a little bit. Is there anything that you believe to be missing? Is there a key component that you think, boy, they missed a trick there, that one should be in there?
I don't know.
No.
I think that kind of the WordPress philosophy of having a platform that's easily extendable. What they have now is what is it feels pretty standard that a lot of people will use. And then it's just up to us to, extend it.
Yeah. And so this WPBlocks.Party, you kind of launched it in April. April was a good idea to launch it in April because, of course, that was when it was all going to ship. I think I don't know the number exactly, but I have a very strong memory thinking about back to December and January that April was the moment. And now we're middle of the year, and we're still not there. What are your feelings on its imminent arrival? Do you think it's going to happen? Well, should we be slightly optimistic? Is it going to happen this year?
I think it's going to happen this year. And, we started, I mentioned that we really got this idea in January during WordCamp Albuquerque. And so we've been building stuff since then. And what I really have noticed is the first few updates broke a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
But the last few haven't.
No.
So I'm feeling like every release, although there's a ton of features being added, every release is getting more stable. And my opinion is we could release it now. I mean, I'm very excited, and not only, my company's built this product, but I'm also really excited to start using it on client sites and clients. I would feel much better using it on a client site when it's a part of core.
I think that's the missing piece of the puzzle that we WordPress people, let's call us WordPress professionals, we kind of forget often, don't we? Is that really this is all about the client at the end, using it and interacting with it, and it's a giant leap forward. It takes us to somewhere where the competition already are. The SaaS products like Squarespace and what have you. They've been doing things like this for a long time, and we need it. I'm really looking forward to it. Obviously, there's that slight element amongst the community, the fear of, will it break things? Am I going to have to redo all my tutorials? Will I have to phone every client up and explain how all this works? My feeling is from having played with it that I agree. It's ready. The updates are coming in thick and fast. It appears like I cover it every week, and there's a great big list every week, 20, 30, 40 little bullet points on the make.wordpress.org website, adding new things in. But nobody's complaining about breaking things anymore, and that time's coming. You never know. By the time we get this podcast out, it could be a moot point. maybe it's already out. It's sort of game over. Just changing tack slightly. With over the last couple of years, certainly in the community that I move in, there's been this really quite dramatic move amongst the people I work with towards, let's call them page builders. There's a whole bunch of them. We know the names of them. Do you think that things like Gutenberg and your blocks are going to eat that cake, or do you think that there's room for both? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think my hope is that the page builders either will change to be Gutenberg based or they'll go away. And I think it's for a lot of the reasons we've already talked about. You have the idea of the standardization, right, where everything feels familiar. You have, and I think there's also great. If people are using Gutenberg blocks that aren't a part of a theme but are part of a plugin, I think there's also a lot of portability, right? Where it can be really hard to change from one page builder to another.
Oh yeah.
So I think there's the potential, at least, for an easier time to have people update their sites to, have a new theme but not need to go back and rebuild all their content. And then I think that the experience of Gutenberg compared to page builders, it just is. I think once people see it, I think a lot of people are going to want to change because, you don't have the kind of confusing interface of, like we mentioned before, flipping back and forth, or having these little blocks that represent your content, but you can't see what's in them. It doesn't. I've noticed sometimes when we've, inherited a site, when someone's come to us for changes for a site we didn't build, it can take me, and I've been doing WordPress for a long time, it can take me a really long time to orient myself. And so, and then if that's for me, how do end users feel?
Yeah.
How do the clients feel?
Totally lost. Yeah. I mean, the reason I think these page builders have kind of become a bit of a thing is because of the amazing level of customization in terms of the layouts. Not necessarily if we assume that the blocks that you can put into Gutenberg are going to be absolutely comparable, the customization level there is going to be equal to what these page builders could do with their little modules that you can drop onto the page. But I think one part that has been part of their success is the way that you're able to customize the layouts to within an inch of their lives. You can drop in rows and columns within columns and rows within you know what I mean. And this can go here, and it all takes care of all the responsive bits and pieces for you. Whereas I get the impression that Gutenberg, it's not trying to do that. That everything's going to be much more stripped down. So from that point of view, do you still think that that there's going to be a place for them? Or you've already said that you hope that they sort of go away, but I think some people like that ability to customize at that finite level. Yeah,
I think that so the piece of Gutenberg that is still, I think, in the experimental stage is the columns and having the idea of nested blocks. And they've made a lot of improvements to nested blocks.
Yep.
And I think that that's a matter of time that all those layout pieces will be available. But even now, you can, if you want to add rows, you could write your own block that does some of that. But until some of the nested stuff, I think it's a little more stable. I think that's a valid point, that the layout piece, I think, is coming. And until the layout piece is fully there, I think we'll just see blocks that maybe like our pricing table block, right? We don't make columns for that. You're not adding like one piece. You have a block that you can add as many of the pricing tables as you want, and the block itself deals with that.
Yeah. Just before we started recording, we had a chat in which you talked about the ability to, how should we approach this? The ability to sort of lock things down within Gutenberg so that certain things, from a client perspective especially, are really easy to manage. And you talked just a moment ago about color palettes and all that kind of thing. Do you want to develop that a little bit? Because I was fascinated by that. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I think that Gutenberg development is going to really kind of take two approaches. At least as I've been thinking about it now for 6 months, working on it, my thinking has really been focused on two approaches. And the first one is like Block.Party, of as much customization as you can give an end user. And I think that works really well for certain types of clients. But then we have other types of clients who have very strict branding guidelines, and they have largely non-technical people entering content into their site. They're, marketing people, right? That are doing all the content. And so I think the other approach that's going to happen is blocks with no customization abilities other than maybe a drop down. And so we're developing this internally right now. And so our approach is, for instance, we have a button element. And this is not a part of Block.Party right now, but we have a button element that is no customization. The only options that you get is a drop down that's primary, secondary, and then primary, I don't remember what we're using, like border only.
Yep.
Or secondary border only.
Yep.
And so the idea there would be is I want a button. I don't want to have my these content creators thinking about, well, what does this button want to look like? We have those 4 options, and then the theme decides.
Yep.
What does the primary button look like? What does the secondary button look like? And so I think for companies that have really strict branding guidelines, they're going to want this type of approach where their content creators have very limited options, because that will then guarantee that every page that they build will be 100% on brand. And it also, I think there's benefits in that it takes away the thinking, right? I don't have to worry about what this button looks like. I just can get in there, build my content, and make a few small choices between some major styles, and then hit publish and not worry about it.
Yeah, the button analogy is a good one, isn't it? I mean, we've all been there where you've handed a client the website, and you come back a few weeks later and it looks very different from the one you gave them, because somebody somewhere thought that they would give this a go. I think that's going to be really interesting. Sorry, you were going to say.
Yeah, and the default blocks are definitely made for the customization. So you can make horrendous looking things with the Gutenberg blocks. So like the default paragraph, I have some slides in some of the talks that I give about this. The default paragraph, you can make the text really big. You can do a drop, I think it's called drop cap, where the first character is really large, but then you can choose any color for the background and any color for the text. So you could have neon yellow text on neon pink background.
And somebody's going to do it.
Somebody's going to do it. So for the branding guideline clients, that's a problem. So, but what's nice about Gutenberg is you can deregister blocks. So what we've been working on internally is, for instance, the button, we deregistered the default button and then put in our own that has the drop downs. And I was talking with somebody who's he just changed jobs. I believe he's working on, I haven't talked with him in probably a month, but he was going to be working at Bluehost with the team that just works on core. They have a small team that all they do is give back to WordPress core.
Yep.
And he and I were talking about this very issue about, is there a way to, instead of deregistering these default blocks, maybe there should be a way where we can just pass in some kind of value that strips out the options instead.
Yep.
And he said that, that's definitely on the roadmap. And I think when that happens, that will just make it even easier for people to say, okay, I want to have this drop down where it adds a class that deals with the styling.
Yep.
And then get rid of everything else.
Yep. That's going to become like job number one, isn't it? When you start a new client website, is deregister all the bits, register, make them look how you want it with the branding guidelines, and then move on and build the pages. Yeah, I mean, if it's got those capabilities, which I'm sure, whether it's going to be done by the next month or the next 2 months, that will be really interesting times, because all of a sudden you're presenting the client with something dead easy to use, and I hesitate to say this, impossible to screw up in terms of styling. Somebody somewhere is going to figure out a way to ruin it. But if I can imagine the conversations going on in our group in a few months. How do you achieve this deregistering? What's a good idea to have as a sort of vanilla install when you hand it over, and so on. And it'll be interesting. We should talk about your just before we finish the pricing that you've got on your WPBlocks.Party website. Do you want to just tell us about how much it is and how long those licenses last for, and so on?
Yeah, so we're still, very new in this, and in terms of building a product. And so we've just been looking at what are some other people doing that provide maybe similar features. And so we have a standard license right now that's $59 a year that gives you unlimited, all our blocks and all the blocks that we'll make in the future. And then we offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, automatic updates, of course, and support. And then the pro version is all the same features, but 3 sites. And then we have an agency, and that's $99 a year. And then the agency pricing is $199 a year, which is for unlimited sites.
Unlimited everything.
And premium support.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So yeah, I see that now. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's exciting times. A long time ago, I thought that this would be a growth area. That somebody would come along and do this, and you are certainly one of the first to it. So, wish you all the best. And I hope it manages. Because I mean, it's every version of WordPress from 5 onwards, this is going to be the thing, isn't it? So you've maybe tapped a really nice vein. I certainly hope so for you and your colleagues. Thank you, Eric, for coming on. I really appreciate it. Is there anything you would like to say before you go? You got a few seconds to plug or mention where you are on Twitter or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Eric Debelak. I'm not very active, but I always do tweet when I give talks. And if you look at some of those tweets, if you're interested in how do I start building these blocks, my WordCamp talks have been about that. And we do have like demo repos on our 11 Online GitHub that if you're curious, if you want to get into this more, there's a lot of code samples there that hopefully people can learn from and maybe feel that it's not so scary to get started. And one thing I do think, there's been a lot of talk about is how much is Gutenberg going to change how WordPress development works. And because that's how I got into software development, is through WordPress. And that was, now I do many other things. We do mobile development and web applications, but WordPress was my first start. And so some people have worried, is Gutenberg going to change that? But I do think that with what we talked about, the standardization and giving you all these components in a standardized way to interact with attributes and things like that, Gutenberg is trying to do everything it can to not change that paradigm. And so we just need to jump into it and give it a try.
That is a great way to end it. We'll jump into it and give it a try. Yeah, not long now. Thank you, Eric, for coming on, and all the very best. Bye-bye.
Thanks to you too. Bye.
And today's ending fact is not a fact at all, actually, because of Sandy Louise liking Nathan's comment about let's knock it on the head. We decided to go back to, for a little while anyway, what we used to do. We used to throw in, didn't we, when we started this podcast, some stupid phrase that we would use.
Yes, we did loads of English isms.
Yeah.
And, just explained what they all meant. I don't know why we did that. It was just a bit of fun. So that's kind of what we're going back to for this episode. Who knows? Maybe the next one as well.
I'm giving you an Indianism, which I absolutely love, and I think we all should adopt this one. It's stop eating my brains, which is just
what does
wonderful.
That mean?
Well, it's when somebody's talking at you and it's just too much information. You just want them to stop talking. I love it. It just describes it. My wife introduced it to me, and I use it on her.
Did she now?
She regrets that.
Yeah. Stop eating my brains, David. Is this a daily thing she says?
No, but I use it on her a lot now, so she regrets it.
So it literally means, it basically is a polite way. Is it even polite? Is it a polite way of saying
I don't
shut
think it's
up?
polite. It's just funny though, isn't it?
Right.
It's just that, don't you get that feeling sometimes? I feel that really with clients if they're just asking a lot of stuff, I just stop eating my brains.
So it's a very quick way of shutting people up, but you wouldn't necessarily write it to a client, even though your head is full of "stop eating my brains." I love it. Great. Well, I think we should keep on this tack and do some more of these little phrases from all over the place because it's a bit of fun. I think maybe the traditional ending facts that we were doing we're getting a bit stale. So let's do this for a few weeks until we come up with something better.
Brilliant.
Right. Thank you for listening to the WB Builds. That's not a podcast. The WP Builds podcast. I have been Nathan Wrigley.
And I've been David Wormsley.
Thank you very much. Go away and share it. Go away and share it. That sounds like stop eating my brains, doesn't it? Go and share it all over the world with the WPBlocks.com podcast player, all the buttons, or go to iTunes. We're getting loads of really nice reviews, so please keep that up. That's very, very helpful indeed. And nothing else to say except cheesy music will be fading in, and it's goodbye.
Bye-bye.